he had done that and gotten in front of it, he wouldn't be in this predicament today. Like I said, honesty is always the best policy. People are smart. There's common sense. We all sense something was not right. And gaslighting us and then telling us, well, you're not even allowed to be a Trump fan is not the way.
So recently, Candace Owens had a podcast about the continuing Epstein cover-up and Trump's biggest mistake in dealing with it. His name being in the Epstein Files and what that tells us, and what is the path forward for this administration as it deals with this issue and tries to deflect from it. Let's get her take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Anyways, in more important news, there is this clip. Jeffrey Epstein's 2010 deposition is making the rounds. It's going viral because it pertains, obviously, to President Trump. And the questions that are being asked of Jeffrey Epstein are of interest. I'll let you take a listen.
Have you ever had a personal relationship with Donald Trump?
What do you mean by personal relationships?
Have you socialized with him?
Yes, sir.
Yes?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever socialized with Donald Trump in the presence of females under the age of 18?
Though I'd like to answer that question, at least today, I'm going to have to assert my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment rights, sir.
Okay, so a couple of things. I actually would like to get further context on why that's from 2010, since he had kind of done his deal, I believe, in 2009. Maybe it was right before he did his deal. Maybe by the time it was done,
I think it was actually 2008, but point stands.
it was thereafter, or they made him, subject to some of these interviews. I'm not sure. But right off of the bat, this is not a smoking gun. Yes, it is extremely odd that Epstein would invoke the Fifth Amendment after answering the smaller questions. Like he said, did you know Trump? Yes. Did you love Trump? Yes, 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 yes. And what do you mean? Could you clarify that question? But then suddenly he invokes the Fifth on the matter of minors having been around them. Yeah, that is strange. As I pointed out earlier, though, it is very likely, as we have seen in other clips of him, he said his lawyers told him to just plead the Fifth all the way through, right? Plead the Fifth all the way through, particularly on the topic of minors, since that's what he's being charged with, right? Activity with minors. But that doesn't mean that Trump was involved with those minors. So we actually should keep a cool head about that, because as my team is pointing out to me, if you ask anybody on my team right now, like, were you around Candace and minors? The answer is yes. We're around my toddlers all day, every day. I work from home. They're around them. Doesn't mean that because Epstein had a minor with him, that Trump knew that that individual was a minor. And I want to remind you guys, especially my newer audience, if you have not gone back and watched our episode regarding the Matt Gaetz story, like why Matt Gaetz was suddenly not allowed to be in the administration at all and why the Department of Justice feared Matt Gaetz, it is an incredible story.
All right, yeah, with the Epstein thing, I believe, again, this was 2008. He was answering some questions they had, whether or not you think Trump is implicated in any of the vile crimes that happened in this case, especially regarding the sex trafficking. There doesn't seem to be a relationship between him and Epstein after 2004. I'm open to contradictory evidence that there was, for sure. I'm no fan of Trump. I would like to get to the bottom of this whole thing regarding not only Epstein's associates in these crimes, but also his associates in money laundering crimes and possible connections to intelligence operatives. Not even possible. We know some of them exist. But this doesn't really tell us more than we know now, other than that Epstein's a slimy fool. And yeah.
Incredible story that, of course, for no reason at all, involves blackmail in Israel, because every good political story in America does, of why they were like, no, this guy cannot be a member of your administration. I'm sure like the Adelsons shut that down immediately, the Adelsons. But it's an incredible story. And one element that you learn is that there are people who have positions in government just for the sake of being able to collect IDs or print IDs. And Matt Gaetz kind of gets involved accidentally because this guy, who I think it's pretty obvious was probably trying to collect blackmail on people that had power and people that had wealth in Florida and who had access to these IDs, was literally printing fake IDs for women. So Matt Gaetz thought that this young woman that's mentioned in the story, is not a minor because she has a totally real, legitimate Florida ID. Again, if that's confusing to you, you have to go back and watch the Matt Gaetz episode. It's called Another Blackmail Operation, and full credit, which I mentioned in that episode, to Village Crazy Lady on X. I actually love her. She's hilarious. And she's the one that did a whole thread on it. And then I based my episode because I was going, this just can't be a real story.
Yeah, she's largely right. Gates had some other issues too, according to the Israel Lobby, according to AIPAC, according to Miriam Adelson, especially because I believe it was in November of last year, he voted against a bill. It was called the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. And what that bill did as part of it, and here's the part that he had objections to, it denied, the Christian gospel that shows that, Jesus was viewed as a heretic by the Pharisees, and the Pharisees played a role in delivering him to the Romans to their death. This bill seemed to have, basically not only thrown questions at that, but outright denied it, and that's why he opposed it. This is his reasoning. He actually supported a lot of Israel First measures, aid to Israel constantly. He wasn't taking money from AIPAC, which is different from a lot of the pro-Israeli Zionists, but he did oppose, some of the messaging that was done to try to, conflate anti-Semitism with anti-Israel behaviors, and that I think is what put a crosshairs on him in a way that other Republicans didn't have. But I guess that's beside the point on this issue in some regards.
So there's an element of that. Just because Jeffrey Epstein has younger women around him, we don't know any context, doesn't mean that Trump knew that person. You could just bring somebody as a plus one. You could have a party, and you're really going to pay attention to every single guest and card them, especially when you're at Mar-a-Lago. Who knows? We're given no further context there. But on the other side, I want to say this. The reason that people think it's a smoking gun is because of the absolute disaster of a way that the Trump administration dealt with these files altogether, right? This is the unforced error of how they went about this entire thing. Doesn't make people feel that they can trust them at all, right? Of course, you are going to assume the worst when they are justifying or are gaslighting their fans, like they're gaslighting the people that have stood with them. Then you're just not even a real Trump fan. Get out of here. We don't even want you as a supporter.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with this more. How they have dealt with this has been completely disastrous, and I see 3 phases of gaslighting that the Trump administration has been involved in here. First, you saw at that press conference when they just wanted it to go away. Pam Bondi said, I'll have to get back to you on whether he had intelligence connections, and that's enough on Epstein. And you had Trump in that same conference saying, I can't believe anyone's asking a question about Epstein. Why are you still talking about Epstein when we had this storm in Texas that, was completely unrelated to people's intrigue into the Epstein story and hoped Trump would bring transparency into it. He was so defensive and dismissive, almost in a way that he had something to hide, because I do think he had something to hide. He was covering this up, and I think they know there's intelligence connections that would be embarrassing to America, that there's associates of Epstein that would be particularly embarrassing not only to Republicans and Democrats. That explains how both administrations has handled it. Phase 2 has been the absurdity to call it a Democratic hoax, to say that this was the product of a Democratic hoax, the Epstein story itself, and the fact that he was operating a sex trafficking ring, likely a blackmail operation for a foreign intelligence agency. To call it a Democratic hoax just calls his supporters stupid. He just must think they're stupid. I mean, our memories aren't great, but they do go back to the years where many of his followers were following him in his first term and paying attention to what the Democrats were doing, and they weren't using the Epstein story against him. Very few people would touch that, especially on the Democratic side, and that's why I think it was right for right-wing populists to bring it up. No, they used, hoaxes like Russiagate and the Jan 6 insurrection narrative to try to do away with him, undermine him, and frame him essentially for treason. That was the second phase of the gaslighting. And then the third phase is the deflection, bringing out all these Russiagate documents, because a lot of the people that are angry with him for how he's handled the Epstein story are also angry, rightly so, for how Russiagate was wielded as a sword against him, and that's how they tried to take him down. But most of the information they unveiled, although I'm very glad they did that, was already publicly known. And they're dangling, the criminality of Obama and Clapper and Comey and Brennan, which they're all criminals, for sure. They're dangling those people out there as criminals, calling them that. But they don't intend to prosecute these people at all or charge them. You're not going to see Obama in handcuffs at a court date, let me assure you. And, for them to do that, it's actually setting us up for another Epstein story-like disappointment.
It is them that forced this outcome by not just being upfront and honest, right? Let's not forget, the Wall Street Journal came out and they said a couple of days ago that they have a source in the administration which confirmed to them that Trump was told at a routine briefing back in May by Pam Bondi that he was in the files, right? And I'm going to say I tend to believe the Wall Street Journal here because when the Wall Street Journal lies, as Trump proved a few days before this, he will be the first person to tweet they are lying. I didn't buy their story about the letter, Epstein letter, or whatever it was. They didn't even show the letter. And what did Trump do? Within 48 hours, he sued them. Within 5 minutes, he tweeted at Rupert Murdoch, I'm going to sue you, blah, blah, blah. This is absolutely outrageous. So when Trump is lied on, he's the first person to take on the press. They even actually ejected the Wall Street Journal reporter from press briefings because he was so outraged by that piece, right?
Yeah, I agree with her on this, by the way, because, yeah, she's right. He does respond viscerally about personal attacks, what would be considered a personal attack to him or something, very sensitive in a way like that. But his name being in the Epstein files, it's not surprising to very many people that study this in depth because you would expect that to happen. He had a long-term friendship with Epstein. You're going to basically guarantee that his name is going to come up in terms of questioning and depositions. Why wouldn't it? I would be equally unsurprised if Bill Clinton's and Alan Dershowitz's and, Bill Richardson's name appeared in the Epstein files, but that doesn't really tell us what we want to know. This is just red meat for media to talk about, I guess myself included, but I think that there is some value in shedding light on the fact that this doesn't mean they're implicated in any crimes in the Epstein files. But that's what the American people want to see. We want to see these files, the information withheld from Ghislaine's trial, search warrant results, the wire transfer information where there are $1.5 billion worth of wire transfers, about 4,700 in total between Epstein and prominent people. They're sitting on this. They went to the grand jury because they either knew that wouldn't produce fruit, which it hasn't, the judge turned it down, but that we wouldn't be getting to the bottom of what we want in the first place. And again, both Biden and Trump's handled it this way. So whether their names appear in the files are not as germane as people want to make it sound. And that goes for both directions, whether it would be Clinton, Trump, Alan Dershowitz, etc. And, Alan Dershowitz himself's been accused by 3 of the accusers of sexual crimes. I think maybe some of them have been dropped over time. But, some of these things are much more germane. We know what we do already, and that's that Trump had a very sound friendship with Epstein until 2004, by all indications.
He didn't respond to this allegation that there was this press briefing in May and that Pam Bondi alerted him to the fact that he was in the Epstein files. Now, if you accept that to be true, or I think that it's reasonable that there could be some veracity to this, then it finally makes sense why he did a 180, right? Why the administration was printing out binders and having girls pose with them. And then suddenly we're like, why is everybody's talking about Epstein? Who cares about Epstein? Because maybe Trump was like, okay, me being mentioned in this file is something that I don't even want to deal with. Doesn't mean implicate that he did something wrong with a minor. But yeah, of course, if you're going, if this is going to be an absolute firestorm, who knows? Like I said, it could be maybe Jeffrey Epstein gave money to Miss Universe or had it funded and was having girls that were underage running through that somehow. Who knows? And maybe Trump genuinely did not know about that until Pam Bondi. And I think that kind of lets us know that he was a bit shocked because they were all fine. I'm sure if he knew he was in that binder or knew that he was somehow involved with Epstein, he wouldn't have allowed them to go outside and take photos with phase 1 binders in February.
So I don't know if I agree with her on this. I don't know that he would have been shocked because it was under his administration that the Epstein investigation began, and the investigation and charges against both Epstein and Maxwell took place. And you have to believe his name would have come up. He was the sitting president of the United States, had a relationship with both of those two, and that would just be normal parts of questioning in any investigation. And for him to be surprised that his name would even appear, that doesn't make that much sense to me. I don't think that would surprise him. Candace is coming up with this possible, suggestion for why this makes sense, that he would be surprised because he didn't know his name was in there, and Bondi went out and dangled those binders and gave them to conservative influencers, and it was a total nothing burger. I don't know what that says. I mean, that could be the deflection, was handing out those binders. That was their angle to deflect from the fact that they weren't going to share real files. Of course, it backfired completely. Many of us thought it at the time, but I don't know if that explains this from Candace's perspective. So I might have to disagree with her a little bit here.
Trump is surprised by this. He would have been surprised in May when she said that, which means he likely was not involved with minors, or right from the jump, he would have said, nope, no binders. Don't promise anything. I'm involved in a really bad way.
It's fair. I can see her viewpoint on it, but I don't think it explains whether he was, implicated or not. His behavior could have happened either way.
I think they made a lot of blunders here, a lot of PR blunders, which seems to be the name of the game. I think he didn't want to deal with the headache, and now he's got an even bigger headache. And now people are assuming the absolute worst, because honesty is always the best policy. If she had said that to him in that meeting, and he would have said, what? And then she briefed him, again, we are obviously surmising here, he could have gone right out and been like, I was just told by Pam Bondi, I don't know who's in these binders. I don't know why I'm featuring this, but my name's in there. I mean, I've been pretty forthcoming. I've been on the plane with him as people, I flew up from Teterboro, but I have no idea in what context I'm being mentioned. And I'm telling her, release it all. If he had done that and gotten in front of it, he wouldn't be in this predicament today.
Totally agree with her on this. Transparency and openness is the best policy. That is the way he could have handled this, where it would not have been an issue like this, where it would not have spiraled out of control, where it would not have had some of his top brass influencers like Tucker and Candace and Matt Walsh have serious issues with how he's dealing with this. Alex Jones too. That is how this could have been put to rest better. It wouldn't have been pretty because the American people wouldn't have been delivered answers they were expected to get. And many of them supported Trump to get, not only in this issue, but in peripheral issues related to government transparency. So yeah, I agree with her 100% on this point.
Like I said, honesty is always the best policy. People are smart. There's common sense. We all sense something was not right. And gaslighting us and then telling us, well, you're not even allowed to be a Trump fan is not the way to dig yourself out of it. It was just wrong. I also want to point to this, or make this last point rather. What's also stunning to consider is that somebody leaked that to the Wall Street Journal. Again, unforced error by Trump by locking arms with never Trumpers. Your entire cabinet is filled with people that hate you. Okay? They've been very clear about hating you. They didn't even support you up until the last second. They were like, no, we're with DeSantis. Anything but you. Okay, for the last 8 years. And suddenly at the very end, when you're the only person left, they're willing to give you money to donate, to host fundraisers for you. And you gave these people positions in your cabinet, like automatically. Common sense. I don't care what you feel about Mark Levin today. You should be like, you were the face of the Never Trump movement, my dude.
Yeah, no, she's almost certainly right here in every regard. The only reservation I would have is saying, like, this happens in most presidential administrations where some cabinet members would not have been totally loyal to that president in the campaign season and primary season, etc. But she is right. Trump is surrounding himself with an amazing amount of quote-unquote never Trumpers, neocons, etc. Some examples were Marco Rubio, were Mike Waltz, were many of these swamp creatures that never had any kind of modicum of support for kind of the America First non-interventionist streak that he was representing at some points and his rhetoric seemed to point to. And you shouldn't be as surprised when these villains undermine a presidency, when you had John Bolton in his first administration doing that, when you had Mike Pompeo and Jeff Sessions. Like, you had a lot of people that Trump surrounded himself with throughout the years that do seem to undermine him. And we saw this too when he bombed Iran. You saw Levin and, Ben Shapiro out there screaming, yes, this is great. This is exactly what we need. If you oppose Trump in this bombing campaign, you're an anti-MAGA now. They're trying to twist Trump in the neocon direction. It's been remarkably successful, and they exercise extreme influence. And I think you can see that in this leak too. So I think she's right about that.
So no, I'm not going to tell people to watch your show. You probably don't have my best interests at heart. That would be common sense. Keep the people there that fought with you from the very beginning, and just don't trust the people around you that are never Trumpers that have suddenly done a 180. But he didn't do that. He welcomed them in, right? So he wanted to be viewed as magnanimous. I don't know what his point was in this. And what they've done is they've proven that they still hate him. They've infiltrated him. Never Trumpers are now leaking stuff. The very Zionists that he is falling over himself to placate are now trying to take him down from the inside. So, there is some poetic justice in that. Stay loyal to the people that have been loyal to you. Don't reward bad behavior. I don't know. What do I know? What do I know? Probably nothing.
Yeah, I think she's right about that, and you can see that even from an outsider's perspective. I've never been a particular supporter of Trump at all, even from his first term, second term, etc. I just call balls and strikes as I see him. I'm not tribalistic and partisan in that way at all. I think he's done mostly bad in his second term, but you can see that. And you can see it in the first term, too, because you had all those intelligence leaks about, how much of a Russian asset he was, how pro-Putin he was, all part of the stupid Russiagate hoax, which we know is proven out to be a hoax. And we know that much of the top Democratic leaders and rulers were in on it, how intelligence operatives and the president of the United States himself was in on it, which makes this even more of a scandal if they don't charge Obama and Comey and Brennan and Clapper. Something tells me no one's going down for this, despite the fact that they talk about it endlessly. They consider it red meat for Trump's base, but they're not going to follow through. Clapper lied on the record in Congress about the NSA bulk data collection program, and he didn't get any indictment, any charges, any jail time. No, he got hired by CNN to be an analyst. That's what's going to happen here. In the corporate media circles and left-wing establishment, Obama and Comey and Brennan and Clapper will be viewed as even more heroic by people still carrying out this farce, this facade, and still, invoking this narrative at times, and it's just absurd. So Trump is setting up for another Epstein-like disappointment by doing that, I feel like. I do think it was smart in the way that, a lot of the people angry about him regarding this were also angry about Russiagate and how that was used as a weapon for like 2 to 3 years. But it won't satiate them. It won't satisfy them if charges don't get handed down. The American people are sick of seeing, criminals exposed without any repercussions whatsoever. And there's a bigger argument against trying to do it with Fauci, even though his pardon was granted by an auto pen. That's a whole nother can of legal worms there, whether Biden even knew about the pardon. But he got a pardon. Obama did not get a blanket pardon, by the way, I hate to say, and they're not going to charge him. So yeah, Candace is right here when she talks about the villains that Trump has surrounded himself with, about possible explanations for him being in the files but not implicated. I think that's right. I don't think his behavior toward Bindersgate really explains that, and I don't think he would have been surprised to learn that his name's in the files, by the way. He was president and friends with Epstein for a fair period of his life, for sure. But at the same time, I have to give her accolades for how she's handled this, how she's blasted the administration for being so bad about this, for gaslighting the American people about this. Whether or not Trump's implicated, they are covering this up, and their cover-up isn't that much different from Biden outside of the circus that they've created. This is their fault. This is Bongino and Bondi's and Patel's fault for building this up as if this would be the ultimate transparency that Trump would waltz into the White House for and give the American people, because that's not how this is being handled. And they're seeing deflect to stuff like Russiagate, but even that I don't think is going to help their case. They've done too much gaslighting, too much defensive posturing, too much dismissal, too much, saying it's a Democratic hoax or that it's boring or that they can't believe American Americans would want to see this, and now just trying to deflect to other issues. Too much of that. Americans can see through this, whether or not they supported Trump or not. But I want to hear what you have to say. Let me know down below. Is Candace Owens right about this? Has Trump bungled this completely? What is something that the administration can do to get away from this? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Candace. Love her coverage on this issue and really appreciate it. And please consider becoming a YouTube member by clicking the join button below. If you do that, I will give you access to all my videos before they go live on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.